My apologies.
Thank you.
This one?
Thank you.
Good morning, sisters and brothers, ladies and gentlemen, gender neutral and gender fluid. As was said, my name is Yvonne Weldon. I am a Wiradjuri woman from Cowra here in New South Wales, from the waters of the Clare, which later became known as the Lachlan, and of the Murrumbidgee Rivers. I am the elected Deputy Chairperson of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, who are the culture authority under the Aboriginal Land Rights Act for the land we're on. I'd like to pay my respects to all elders past and present, to all First Nations, to you and the ancestors' lands that you travelled from today. The boundaries of our traditional owners are not defined by the hand or by the pen, but through the natural landscapes of the earth. The Eora Nation's country covers Hawkesbury in the north, the Nepean in the west, and the Georges River in the south. My people have practiced our traditions for thousands of years and endless generations. One tradition that is shared in various forms across Australia is a welcomed country. It is more than just words, it is a spiritual process by honouring the ancestors' footsteps we are all walking in. Continuing the practice of the many generations before us to the many generations to come. My people have been a part of this land for more than 65,000 years. We are the world's oldest living culture. And on behalf of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, the elders and the members, I welcome everyone to the land of the Gadigal. I acknowledge the Gadigal people whose spirits and ancestors will always remain with this land, our Mother Earth. The First Nations of this continent are the most resilient, unique and sustainable people on the planet. For our people to survive for as long as we have, it's been through a continual practice of respect, collaboration, understanding and a willingness to come together. As we're all joined here today, and to give respect and honour, could you all please pause for a moment to remember the many sacrifices that have been made along the way, the ones we'll continue to make, and those we shouldn't have to. The challenges that we're all faced with today is not the same as it was a few years ago, or even in the last year or so, yet it has become an accepted norm. It brings a disadvantage that flows on from one generation to the next. The cycle doesn't only change because of policy, legislation, or even governments. The battles through the endurance of adversity is the greatest evidence that needs to be included and needs to be heard. But it shouldn't be gathered this way, and certainly not through our heartache. It cannot always be about data and the bottom line. Our lived experience must be included as well. Human life and people's opportunity, or lack thereof, cannot be rationalised what will never be equal. So as you connect, learn and share today, tomorrow and beyond, remember there are so many factors that can impact us, such as our history, recognised or not, can affect our future. No matter what walks of life we all come from, we all need to support each other, bringing out hidden heartaches to share and bringing us all strength together. The road travelled alone is the longest, hardest road there is. I will join you and you can join me. The greatest gift you can ever give someone is your time. For so many of you supporting people in your work, in your families, in your communities, you often take on more than just the job or the role. It stays with you long after. You all have an important role in so many people's lives. This should be recognised. You are recognised, and I thank you. Whether it's through your work, your family, or your networks, creating an inclusion, an acceptance, and a resilience. All of us together can bring about positive changes to multiple generations. We are in this together. And it is Reconciliation Week, with the theme, as was said, be brave, make change. Are we making change? We all can be that positive change each and every day. But know that the answers to the questions about my people not only needs to have, but we should have, the voice of Aboriginal people first, because we are the first people of this country. Then we can walk together with this recognition when it is truly accepted. and not just during this week alone. So let us all draw upon my people's spirits as we continue on our journey. May my people's spirits walk with you and guide you as we strive forward for us all. Again, on behalf of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council, welcome to Gadigal land. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yvonne, for that very warm welcome to country. I'm Stephen Collins. I'm the moderator today, so I've got the hardest job of keeping everyone on track and also keeping my mouth shut. And really welcome you to Parliament today. I'm the Aboriginal Liaison Officer here, but also a Pitta man, and myself a descendant of the stolen generations. I also would like to acknowledge country and acknowledge that we're here on Gadigal country and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I acknowledge all Aboriginal people in the room today and those joining us today via our live stream. When I reflect on this year's theme about be brave, make change, I really reflect on, I always think about truth-telling and the history of this place, the history that this was the place that made laws that impacted every aspect of an Aboriginal person's life, where they could live, where they could travel, who they could marry, removal of children, just to name a few. And bring that back to the really importance of our truth-telling and our shared history. Really looking forward to today's conversation in collaboration with Reconciliation New South Wales. So before we get stuck into our questions for today, I would like to just hand over to Joshua Gilbert, who is the co-Indigenous chair for Reconciliation New South Wales, to say a few words. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Hi, everyone. I'd like to start by acknowledging country and thank Yvonne for her very warm welcome, and pay my respects to elders past and present here and to all those joining on the call today. It's a real privilege to be here. I'm a Woromi man from the mid-north coast of New South Wales, and I'm the Indigenous co-chair of Reconciliation New South Wales. We're the peak body for reconciliation here, and our role is to really work with community members, government leaders, businesses, and the general public really to go on this process of reconciliation. We have a really incredible schools-based program where we work with young kids on their reconciliation journey, and it's a real pleasure to be here and to host and share the hosting of this with Stephen. In New South Wales Parliament. As Stephen said, the theme of this year does provide a lot to think about in this space, and it's a real pleasure for us to be here and to share this stage. We have some merchandise out the back if you'd like to follow our journey and learn a bit more, and we'd really recommend you joining us as members on your reconciliation journey so that we can all take part of this conversation going forward. Thanks.
Great, thank you. We're going to kick off, and I think if we could go around and have our panellists introduce themselves and really reflect on what this year's theme means to them. And we'll start with you, Natalie. I usually say it's bad to be to the left of the speaker, but we'll start with you, Natalie.
Okay,
thank you.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. So I'm Natalie Walker. Everyone calls me Nat. I'm Gugal Yalanji from the Daintree Rainforest in far north Queensland. Beautiful country if you've not been there. I've lived in Sydney for the last 20 years, so it is my second home, and I'm the Social Commissioner for the Greater Cities Commission as part of a range of other board positions that I hold. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this discussion today, and thank you, Yvonne, for your warm welcome, and I feel privileged to work and live on Gadigal land. What this really means for me, be brave, make change, is, I think of my kids when I think about this year's theme, and I think about what the future holds for them. And I'm reminded of my son when he was 4, he's now 5. He came home from daycare one day and he said, "Mum, you know what? I can do anything." I said, "Really? Why is that?" "It's great, but why? Why do you say that?" He goes, "Because I'm Aboriginal." Now, that was not my experience of being Aboriginal and growing up in Australia, especially in far north Queensland. And it brought a tear to my eye because I thought, this generation coming through now, all they see is hope and possibility and that they can do anything. And so that's partly a testament to Narragansett and the reconciliation program, I think, that's running through early learning centres and schools. But also it's an indication of the change that has been made in our community since I was at school, since my dad was at school, my grandparents who didn't go to school. But it's a reminder of we're building the future for the next generation to come. That's our responsibility as the adults in the room. So we have got to be brave, and we've got to make change so that not just my son, but all the little kids coming up now and the ones still to come, they feel like they can do anything, and they actually can do anything.
Right. It's great to have another Queenslander on the panel as well. Don't hold that against us. Geoff.
Oh, okay. Thanks for having me here today. Welcome me here. My name is Geoff Scott. I'm a Wiradjuri man from Western New South Wales, just out past Dubbo. So again, Wiradjuri is the biggest nation, actually.
And the best.
Yes, I was going to say the centre of the universe, but yeah. But and I've held various positions over the time. I was the Director General of the department here for about 5 years. I ran Newswalk for about 10 years, and I was the CEO and Deputy CEO of ADSIG, and a few other bits and pieces along the time. So I've had a fair bit of involvement in public administration, and especially in the Aboriginal Affairs area. And just reflecting on those, lots of misdemeanours to make up for part of that. But reflecting on those is just where we are today. I think the board made comment about the words behind the reconciliation issue: be brave and be courageous. There are great opportunities before us now. We had a momentous event happen a week ago. A bit more. So I think it's given us new hope and new focus, but a real challenge. And it'll take bravery, it'll take courage to get it done. And we're looking for all our friends to do that. The reconciliation movement will play a vital part in that. And the state reconciliation groups and the local groups do a fantastic job. They give real meaning to the process of reconciliation around the country. Especially New South Wales group is one of the most active ones in the country. That's currently my story, but looking forward to providing information and responding to questions.
Right, thank you.
Oh, sorry, my latest job at the moment is I'm currently the Director of the Uluru Dialogue. I was the Executive Officer that did the dialogues around the country, including the 13 regional dialogues and the convention at Uluru. So I'm very much invested in that, as you can imagine. And just looking forward to having the debates and discussions with people about where we take this from here.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Geoff. Yvonne.
Yvonne Weldon. I was born here. I've grown up here, but my spiritual connection will always be on Wiradjuri country. My parents are both Wiradjuri, so my children have a biological father, but they are Wiradjuri. We are a matriarchal society, and I am very proud of the many that have handed down to me their learnings and their experiences and their faith and belief. When I think about the theme, I don't think about myself. I think about my family members that have gone on to the Dreamtime and the difference that they made for each and every one of us. Their staunch trailblazing made it possible, and I'm still fortunate to have a few still here. My mum and my dad and Uncle Paul and, Anune Mayers, there are so many that, took the hard hits for each and every one of us. We wouldn't have roles identified if it wasn't for people raising the issues, and self-determination came by people determining what their self meant in this country. And so those protests, and Joseph, the photographer at the back, he was a terrible child. I'm just putting that out there, but he's a great photographer apparently. But we are the children of the revolution, and so that is who we are in terms of being brave and making change. We've seen it and we've been a part of it. I think that there has been time where things have changed in a positive, but there's also been a subtlety around some of that change in a negative too. Also for me, being elected last year, being the first Aboriginal person to be elected on the City of Cities Council after 180 years is a proud moment, but an insulting one at the same time. You know, we are in 2022, and it took that long for what reason? And, you know, as an independent and has stood on values of what I've been raised on is what we all should be, you know, reflecting about and how we make that change. But for me, make change is, you know, my standing, and I'll you know, one of the real reasons why I do what I do is because I want to make sure that my grandson does have change in his lifetime. And when I stood last year and we had posters, you know, across the LGA, and he goes to preschool at Paddington, and outside his preschool there was a poster of mine, and you know, and he looked through the teachers that watched him, and he could see my poster through the fence, and he said to his two little mates, two non-Aboriginal mates, he said, "Come here." He said, "That's my Nina." So if he could say that at 2 years of age, what is possible for him when he's 20 years of age? So that's about being brave, and that's about change, and that's from his generation, because I don't know if I'll ever get to see it in mine. So thank you.
Josh?
Yeah, so as I said, I'm a Woromi man. I'm a mobber from around the Munkerai, Gloucester area of the mid-north coast of New South Wales. I actually grew up on Wiradjuri country, and yeah, it's a really beautiful country. I'm back down there tomorrow, so looking forward to getting back down there. I have a few different roles. As I said, I'm the Indigenous Co-Chair of Reconciliation New South Wales. I work at the Jumbunna Institute of Research at UTS, and I've been there for almost 12 months. And before that, spent 7 years at PwC's Indigenous Consulting. I am also studying a PhD in Indigenous agriculture post-colonisation at Charles Sturt University, and looking at the role that mob had within the agricultural sector due to colonisation, and then the impacts of that, and also how much our mob thrived in some of those early years, even though more was taken off us to our detriment. So for me, this conversation is really important, and I think the theme for me is a reminder that change is a process, and that we can't just jump and make giant leaps as much as we want, but it's the incremental things that we do over time that are really going to stack up and make a big impact over generations. And that, for me, is a real commitment that we need to start making now, continue making, based on the activism and the work done by our elders. And really that process, I think, is at a stage where I think the commitments made by the federal government recently, and you know, the changing dialogue that's happening in the media, all points to a sign that we can keep making those changes going forward, and that we, for the future generations, will have a much better situation for them.
Brilliant. Look, I'm going to start with like 5 years ago, so back in 2017, and I think we'll definitely start with you, Geoff, as being part of the dialogues. So the Constitutional Convention, as we know, brought together over 250 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander representatives to resolve the reforms of the Uluru Statement from the heart, to call for a constitutionally enshrined voice to Parliament, and a Makarrata Commission to supervise a process of agreement making and truth-telling between governments and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. So really keen to hear, so being quite involved with the dialogues, Geoff, we'll start with you. How has the Uluru Statement from the heart, or the reforms of voice, treaty and truth, really changed the way you view your work, the reconciliation movement, or even the public support?
Well, I think the Uluru Statement is probably one of the most talked about, researched and quoted documents I've ever seen. And it's been phenomenal since that time happened. But the work's only just begun. It was 5 years ago since we did that work. There were 13 dialogues held around the country. They were very carefully designed. We had a limited time and limited budget to get it done and have the consultation figures back to the Referendum Council. And part of that was a very deliberate design about including people on the ground, local organisations being the ones who picked who was coming to the meetings themselves. And it was the New South Wales Land Council doing both of them in the New South Wales, but around the country it's the same process put in place. Having 6% of the attendance being from the cultural authority, the land councils and the native title groups, 20% from the very important organisations we have, and 20% from individuals, trying to give everyone the opportunity to have a say. And the structure of the dialogues themselves was one where there were a few proposals put up, and that went around the country and they're discussing them all. So it was very structured in the way it went about what the proposals were. A whole range of lawyers are in the room, but not allowed to speak unless they were asked a question. But about explaining it to people and how it all worked. And it's, some people think it's a very dry subject, the Constitution, but it's something we're very lucky not to be debating all the time. We're a lucky country in that regard. I think the only trauma we've had was Darwin got bombed once and they didn't tell us about it. But most other countries have a real focus on their Constitution because it means so much. But the proposals that were put up were really hotly contested and debated in those forums. And in the end, of all of the 5 points they put up, one was Section 25. Everyone knows Section 25 is where if one of the jurisdictions passes laws which limit people from voting on the basis of race, they can have their representation numbers reduced, so their MPs reduced. It's never been used. It's just borrowed from the American Constitution. I think they call our Constitution the Washminster one. It's part of Washington and Westminster. Then we had I'll try and get through this quickly, the race discrimination clause. We're going to have one of those in the Constitution. And after the debate and the lawyers are sitting there, it said it didn't make a difference. The current legislation applies to everyone except the Commonwealth Parliament. They can be as racist as they want. That's their God-given right. But and putting a clause in the Constitution will not change that. Still have an intervention. You still have all the measures that were taken. Then there was the issue about treaty making and the voice were discussed, and also amendments to Section 5126, which is the race power. And again, the debate was, after all the discussion with lawyers and debating around the room for 2 days, that changing was fiddling with it. It meant nothing. There will always be a way of getting around it, and the Commonwealth would do that. So in the end, the forums came out almost universally with the same sort of view that they wanted a voice. Over the decades, many of the voices that had been created were denied. They were abolished and washed aside by the government of the day when it didn't suit their purpose. ATSIC was the last one executed, and that was done with the agreement with the Labor Party. So we're very focused on what the issue. But when the document came out, it was presented at the meeting in Alice Springs, and we put aside a day and a half to have a debate on the document itself. But after the drafters worked all night, who were appointed from the meeting itself, they got the document together, they presented it to the floor and discussed it for half an hour, 40 minutes, and then okay, we'll go into groups and discuss it all now. And then, well, one of our members from here, Sol Blair, was the person who got up and moved the motion. I don't believe in amendment by committee. You can't better this. I'm putting it to the floor, and they did. And it was universal acceptance of the document. That's how it got through. But what was very important about the document itself was actually a focus on the people, not on the politicians. We needed to get the people to be our voice, or to give us our voice, not politicians. They can be taken away with a whim, and it has happened over time, every time. Every voice has been removed. And that's part of why we need a protected voice in the Constitution, and that's what the focus is now. Many aspects to that. There's many people debating it, the issues. There's issues about how it affects sovereignty, how it affects self-determination. We've got to have those debates and get out and have much more consultation before whether we do that before the referendum is called or after is that one of the contentious points. Our last debates on when was our last referendum attempt? 99, both defeated. Put up by a government who then undermined it. Both the Republic debate and the Aboriginal preamble and the Constitution. So, and we're in a different era now with the Constitution. Social media and the whole communication world has changed enormously. So negotiating that and getting strategy for how we go about that is going to be vitally important as well. That's basically where it's at the moment. The only other point I'd make is there's a lot of debate, and some politicians are even now saying we agree, but we're going to change the order. We're going to do it our way, not your way. That's why politicians don't support us. That's why we need our own voice. But there was a very definitive sequence in it. It was having the voice first and having truth-telling and treaty-making after that. We need a body that's in place who can provide the support, make sure it's appropriate, it's resourced properly, and it's timely and enough time's been given to make sure that it works. Various attempts at these measures in the past have fallen short. Governments have very short windows, 3 to 4 years, elections. We need a much longer time frame to actually make sustainable change. And our fates are tied to each other. Aboriginal people aren't going anywhere. And neither is the rest of Australia. We have many other friends joining us from other nations. So it's a real opportunity to have that debate about our Constitution and what it means. One of those people who finds the Constitution very interesting. I tend to bore people, but we look forward to the debates.
Great. Thank you so much, Geoff. Now, Yvonne, you were one of the delegates that was at the Uluru Convention.
I was here in Sydney.
Here in Sydney. Oh, sorry. I thought you were at. Sorry, yeah, I thought you were there. I'd really love to hear your views and really, well, how has this changed your view with your work or reconciliation? And
I certainly, over time, the term reconciliation wasn't something that I embraced that well because I didn't have issues to reconcile. There was more about the fact that there was such a great denial of what has taken place with my people. There is still an element of that, but certainly there has been a real great shift, and I have done a lot of work with Reconciliation Australia and also the New South Wales section. But I think over time, my connection around reconciliation and how I can support people to recognise and to reconcile within themselves for my people. When we think about a them and us environment, it often is about reflection on all sides, and sometimes it's always been about the Aboriginal reflection and no one else. And it's been about, well, what are we prepared to concede that what we've already endured, which is so insulting in the process when I think about all the trauma that continues to exist. Some of the issues, or most of the issues that we're dealing with today around overrepresentation in a negative for our people. I mean, I'd like to have overrepresentation in a positive for my people, but when we think about the overrepresentation in a negative for my people, it's always blame for my people. But where did the journey start and where did the trauma start? And so it's about the ownership of that. There was a sorry that was said a few years back. That's sorry for one issue. There's so many others that we've got to be able to address. I certainly was at the consultation, and I use the term loosely, and with all respect, Geoff, we'll have a debate no matter whether it's going to be here or elsewhere, but there was part of that. You can talk about design and you can talk about engagement and you can talk about consultation. I don't see Aboriginal engagement in the same way. Why should I be at the table, regardless of the fact that I've been elected into certain roles? Why should I be at the table over my elders? I struggled with that. I still struggle with it. I think about my 80-year-old aunt that has lived on mission days and continues to have that trauma. I think about my 70-year-old mother that, was hid in the chimney whenever the welfare came around because she was fair enough to be blended enough. I think about family members that were taken away and never came back unless they were in wooden boxes to be put back to the earth. They're the stuff that I think about because of those people. They have more of a right than I do to sit at those tables. And so in terms of consultation, yes, some of us that are in different roles have a responsibility and have those voices on behalf of others, but you can't do it at the expense of them. And so in terms of what we're talking about, the voice, I think that there's a way to go. It's definitely, the journey in trying to get the voice for our people, it's an important part of that. But I do think that there are other stages that need to take place in terms of looking at the hundreds of different nations, tribes and clans across this continent. We are sovereign in our own right, and we need to have those engagements and those conversations. And Wiradjuri people, we will not all agree. We are many different clans, and so, but we have to have a true conversation and engagement and dialogue as people, not as this group and that group, and that's the part that I've really struggled with. In terms of going along to the consultation out at Rooty Hill, and the numbers were limited, time frame was limited, finances were limited. It always is limited when it comes to my people. We are only 3% of the population, but everything always gets rationalised at the expense of ourselves. So I think that there is so much more investment that needs to take place if we're truly going to engage in a way that is meaningful and not tokenistic. I'm not suggesting that it was tokenistic. What I am saying is that it wasn't inclusive as it suggests. There was definitely a greater group that it came together and historical in a way that it hasn't taken place. But when I think about it as a HSC school leaver in '88, and I think about that march that took place from here down to Lady Macquarie's chair, one of those, as a young Aboriginal woman that saw this, had marched my entire life from Redfern to Parliament House here to Town Hall to talk about our rights. I saw a movement that took place across this country, and I think that there is a movement across this country today in terms of getting a voice, and hopefully that is converted in a referendum. If it needs to go that way, or why shouldn't it be just like the gay marriages? Why can we not do the same sort of process? I think there are options that we need to look at. What is rightful in this country? Not with something where everyone's conscience has to be addressed. What is rightful in the first place? We never ceded our rights. So when I think about that movement that took place, or that march that happened here in '88, that movement was people calling, voting with their feet and standing side by side. There needs to be more of that, and we certainly need to be able to do it with the First Nations of this country first and foremost, and then we can do it with every country, then some.
Great, thank you so much, Yvonne. And I think I definitely want to circle back around to consultation at some point, because I think that's a very important point to discuss. And Natalie, would you like to add anything to what does the Uluru Statement mean, especially for your work, and has it changed any way that you work, or even in considering the reconciliation movement?
Absolutely. I think really for me, the difference between having constitutional enshrinement and recognition of Australia's First Peoples versus not is a difference between building a house on sand and building it on a firm foundation of bedrock. We don't have that, and we know that we can't, at a minimum, close the gap, and at best help our mob live their lives to their fullest if we don't also have the structures in place to support our own agency in making the decisions that affect our lives, the policies that affect our lives, the laws that affect our lives. So achievement of outcome, substantive outcome, comes with major structural reform, and it starts with voice. It also starts with agreement making and truth telling. And when I think about the work of the Greater Cities Commission, and I think about the future of the city region, it is just plainly obvious that recognition of Aboriginal peoples has to take prominence in that thinking, in that planning. We are, if we're going to be a city region on a global scale, the thing that makes us distinct and different from Randstad, from Singapore, from Silicon Valley, San Francisco, is we have the world's longest surviving continuous living culture. And all of the intelligence, knowledge, wisdom that brings from Newcastle down to the Illawarra out to the Blue Mountains. And it's, when I think about that, I think it's just such a gift for our place to make prominent the voice, the experience, the wisdom and the knowledge and the Aboriginal ways of doing and being of the mobs in the city region. So, yeah, it means a whole lot, and I have to say it's a relief that we're having this conversation now, a real substantive conversation about how we're going to make it happen.
And fantastic. And Joshua?
Maybe just quickly, I think for me, the Uluru Statement does provide is a framework for non-Indigenous and Indigenous people to come together. And the reason I think that's important is because we know we have to gain the support of the 96.5% of non-Indigenous people to help push through a voice, to help agree to some of these movements going forward. And only with that support will we be able to provide and have the opportunity to go through this process. So for me, it's a real commitment and a guidepost, I guess, from mob community on the ground to say that, this is a process that we want to engage in, and clearly kind of defines what that process might be and how non-Indigenous mob might want to go down that journey as well.
Right. Now, I think about what the Prime Minister said and he on election night, and obviously committing to the statement in full, and really reflecting on some of the conversation about consultation and saying limited resourcing. And what does this mean going forward? We have Linda Burney now as the Minister. Like, what does that mean when we think about consultation? And is this now the time to really have a in-depth, meaningful consultation around where do we go through next from here? So I'd love to start with you, Yvonne, if that's...
Oh, look, I think that, there's probably... I mean, I don't know if they've finalised what they're doing in terms of the portfolios and moving forward. I mean, clearly, the new Prime Minister has made a commitment. What that looks like in practical steps moving forward, we're yet to see that. I certainly hope that there'll be a clearer direction around what that means in terms of meeting with people on the ground. From my understanding and my conversations, prior to the election, but certainly over time, when they had the a standing committee as well, and some of the questions that were being asked, that there's opportunity, I think, for greater engagement and a true consultation process. As Geoff said, there was 13 processes. I think that there is so much more that needs to take place, but there are people that need to be engaged with in a way that continue to practice that will never be represented in any words. And we have to make sure that we're engaging with them and that they are represented in whatever process moving forward, because otherwise we're not being inclusive of all. It is just a sample. And yes, you can't consult with every Aboriginal person in the country, but we need to make a concerted effort to make sure that we are engaging with the people and not just for them.
Completely agree, and I think when you spoke about our old people and ensuring that their voices are really reflected as they're, because of them, that's why we can sit here and have these conversations. Natalie, I'd love to hear your thoughts on. Yeah,
I mean, if I maybe take us a step back to when news broke that the group at Uluru had reached consensus on the voice and an outcome. I remember being at home, those moments in your life where you remember where you were. That's one of those moments. I remember where I was. I was in my lounge room nursing my newborn, watching the news, and I think my phone was going off. And it just brought home the power of the moment, because, to be honest, I went in to observing the process and the dialogue process with a bit of scepticism that consensus wouldn't be reached, and because we do have, rightly so many different views. The fact that consensus had been reached was just so powerful. I remember texting one of the leaders of the group at Uluru, just saying, "Thank you, thank you. This is the first really important step to take us forward." So if I think about what that means today, when I watched Prime Minister Albanese's speech on Saturday night, all I felt was relief, because I thought of all the things that he could have said first, the universe of things that he could have said first. He talks about he reinforced the commitment, as you said, to, implement the Uluru Statement from the heart in full. So I think what that means now is really taking the gift that those at Uluru have given the government, but also the people, Australian people, as Geoff said, and trusting that they're the wisdom of that, and not trying to turn it into something else, making sure that there is, at the key steps along the way, it's inclusive, people are involved, can provide feedback, but let Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people lead the process. I think that's really important. And as Geoff said, the order of things was very well thought out. This is pivotal, and I think we just got to trust. We absolutely have to trust Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to know how to take this forward.
Absolutely. And Josh, would love to hear your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I think for me, broader than the political realm, I think it opened up publicly that this conversation could take place. I think we spoke earlier around the ability to actually have a yarn about this again, and that kind of ability to open that up. And I think the way the media has really responded to that, the amount of articles that have been published recently really showcases that there's the ability for this conversation to take place. I think the process and the order is really important. And one of the things I reflect on is being in a pretty regional town, if we are to mess up the order, we will get a very different outcome. If we engage in truth-telling first, there is a risk, I think, in regional towns that we will not get the buy-in for a voice later on because of the tension of the truth-telling that needs to happen in regional towns. So I think for me the order is pivotal, and I think we now have the ability to have this yarn, to think through it more clearly, and to continue pushing. I think once this hopefully gets through, for more change as we keep going.
Right, and Geoff, over to you. And I think as well, you're talking before, and I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially around the political cycle too. So I think, what does that mean when we come to consultation?
Well, I think we've got to be very mindful about how structural change and reform can happen in the country. It doesn't happen quickly, and it's not easy. If it was easy, it would have been done before. So, again, we need to be brave and make the change. I think the consultation phases, I think anyone mentioned we had 13 dialogues. In the original plan, we started off at 38 and asked for an amount of money to try and get it done. It came back and we had to end up with 13 after discussions with Ms Credlin, which were very interesting. But that's the debate we had. We had to trim it back in terms of time and in terms of resourcing. And there was always the issue here that we canvassed most of the issues, but we had to come back. But one point I didn't make before was that the actual concept and idea to move for a voice first and pick that being the only option was so the government couldn't cherry pick. I'll pick one aspect and do that one and forget the rest. And that's always been done when we do reports. Have a look at every Royal Commission. Have a look at Birmingham Home Report. It happens all the time. Pick the easy one and the rest we'll forget. But that's the process we ended on. But the people who actually made those suggestions were people in the dialogues themselves. And in each dialogue there was a session because people hadn't been able to get together for many years. And not since actually had been executed. So there wasn't the space in the room to have those discussions and stories like we're talking about today. It's just starting this discussion now. And people vented on it. And so we want a process where our voice won't be muted in the future. We have some certainty going forward. And I'd like to talk about the intervention and what it's doing to us, especially in the territory and in the bush meetings we went to. I want to talk about the cash card. I want to talk about what a debacle the IS scheme was. I want to talk about how governments don't talk to each other, how we're played off. I want to talk about cost shifting. Be surprised how much Aboriginal people on the ground in those communities know about how government works and how the policies work and how they don't. Because they do, because they live it every day. Having those debates really brought that forward. But that was really just starting that process. We know that's got to be done in a much more strategic and sustained way. But it's trying to get the voices of those who don't usually have a voice and have them heard. The major focus here is to ensure that our children have a better chance at life than we did. And their children would be better. And that keeps going. I think everyone wants that. And that's what the focus has been on the dialogue itself. Our focus here is to make a better life for our children. People ask, what will the voice do? But anyone read the Indigenous expenditure reports that came out of the Productivity Commission? We had a look at them. I think the latest quote was $35 billion a year spent. That's how much they're spending. It's a pretty poor result. I think it's in that being done for the last 4 or 5 decades as an indictment on all of us that we haven't had the progress that's been required. That's because programs aren't talked about with people that are the subject of them. Projects are given and delivered. They're not negotiated, they're not put in place, they're not planned. That's one of the biggest issues we've got to look at. It's just what's happening with the government's efforts. There is substantial effort, but the resources aren't getting there. The outcomes aren't being realised. We have another generation of kids in a worse position. Incarceration are just ridiculous, and they're getting worse. Employment rates is going backwards. Everything. We just had 15 years to close the gap. Close the gap. It's called close the gate. We've had 15 years, and the sum result of that is every year we have a report bemoaning how we're not making any progress. We have a competition for the best painting to go on the front cover. It's about the biggest outcome we've got. Another process in place now, and I hope that one has a much more sustained outcome and focus on efforts process. But they're the sorts of things that a voice needs to be involved in. We have a Senate process which is supposed to analyse government's performance. In the latest report the Productivity Commission did into Aboriginal programs, which is in 2015, it found that 89% of all programs had never been evaluated. Not even when they started out, so they didn't know where they were starting from, let alone where they were going. So that some rigour and discipline in there for people on the ground need to do that. In the debates on the co-design committee, which had a consultation phase in as well, which, well, everyone's critical of consultation phases, but that was particularly a poor one. They did come back and identify there should be 35 regions, so that programs and efforts and just how we go about the relationships vary from region to region, and it needs to be tailored to meet the needs of people on the ground. What's suitable in a remote region is not what's suitable in the city or a regional centre, or even sitting here in Sydney, but what'll work on the coast and up in Woromi country is different because the lived realities are different and the circumstances are. And we need to start treating the causes, not the symptoms. We have too much symptom focus on our programs. That's what the cash card is. It hasn't changed anything. It's just stopped people spending money on alcohol. They still do it anyway because they swap it. They're very... But we have to have policies which actually bring about real meaningful change. Policies which are supported and backed by Aboriginal people. I think that's the key to the consultation phases, but it won't be perfect first up. It never is. It's got to evolve. It'll change depending on the circumstances and need and what happens. We've only got 3 years to the next government. We have a window. Those 12 months.
Look, I think that's what you were touching on there, and I think when you touched on trauma, I mean, that really lends itself into that kind of conversation around that we have to address those issues around trauma, and I'm mindful of the time, and I'm so enjoying this yarn, so unfortunately we're going to have to do a wrap up, and really would love to hear about, well, what's missing and what's next from our panellists, and we'll start with you, Nat, I think.
Maybe I will take that question as a comment and respond with my own answer. I think is actually really to take the 25,000-foot view of this conversation and all the conversations that have come before. I just really want to emphasise something that I think can often be missed. We show up. Government asks us for feedback on things, to consult, to engage, to provide advice. We always show up. Whether it's Yvonne's grandmother or, the people at Uluru or those who've been working on the voice since Uluru and to today, we are standing on the shoulders of those who have come before us, who have always shown up because they're wanting a better future for their kids and their kids' kids, we are showing up and we will continue to show up. And so I think that's really important to emphasise, because we don't see ourselves as being supplicants in this process. We have so much skin in this, and we want this to work. So meet us at that point and let's walk together. I can't talk to what's missing. There's a whole lot to unfold, but I would say let's start from the place of strength, which is we always show up and we want to do this together, but also let's trust the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander community. We have been working on this for so long. We have wisdom and knowledge that is valuable and should be preferenced, and let's just get on with it.
Brilliant. And I mean, Yvonne also spoke about walking with us. I mean, that's a theme that you hear from a lot of Aboriginal people. It's like, walk with us and have those conversations. Joshua, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, I think we could yarn about this all day, and I think we've probably highlighted the fact that we need to yarn about this all day, and we need to for mob and non-mob as well, to kind of continue having these yarns and going forward. Obviously, mob need to go through the process first and include non-Indigenous mob later. But for me, I'm really fascinated about the future. I think we know the Indigenous youth demographic is the only growing youth demographic in Australia. We're going to have more young Indigenous mob on the ground every year going forward. And that really excites me, because I think the future that we work on together with now is going to be, you know, what they live every day, what the opportunities exist for them, and what their pathways are going forward. So for me, it's really around this time. We need to come together. We need to share the yarns, the stories. We need to go through this process that should have been done, you know, from the very start, and that this is a joint responsibility. It's not just on our shoulders; it's on yours as well. So walk with us. Really let our strong mob guide you in this journey, and support us through that, because it's not going to be easy, but we know if we get there, it'll be a better future for our future generations.
Thank you. And I mean, and again, touching on what you said, Nat, it's like, yeah, we show up. We have that generosity. We have that courage and resilience to show up and have those conversations.
Look, you know, there are so many systems, both Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal, that assist and create more trauma. I can tell you, whether it be, the New South Wales Aboriginal Land Rights Act, that, 83, or native title and everything else in between. We think that, often people zoom in on particular words and think that it actually has evolved into a realisation of what that word is. It could be talking about community, it could be talking about land rights, it could be talking about a whole range of things, but we aren't talking about the same level playing field here. Aboriginal people do it at the expense of ourselves all the time. And there are so many people that are either well-funded and, recently or a couple of years ago when they looked at the Aboriginal grants that were given from the Commonwealth, majority of the organisations were non-Aboriginal organisations and corporates. So when we look at, and Geoff talked about the Productivity Commission, report and how much money is being spent. There are even government departments that say that they're doing Aboriginal specific things, but they only do it if they get the Aboriginal dollars allocated to them. How do we embed change in our practices is one of the key parts of how we get some of this stuff done. The fact that we have to fight to have our voice being heard before we even can get to truth or treaty, there is so much more that needs to get done from each and every one of us. We do show up, we are here, we have never gone away, but yet we have to continually argue to be at the table. I don't think that and the same thing has been said, that women are not on, are not on boards, and not doing this and not doing that. Don't even worry about that stuff. Look about where we're coming from. When we think and when you see where Aboriginal people are making strides in certain areas, it's those areas that we are making strides in are often the most difficult. I have worked in youth justice for the last 6 years, some of the challenges that I have seen in this day and age should not even exist anymore. And yet, you know, as the most senior Aboriginal person employed in that department or in that agency, it's tough because there are those truths that people don't want to hear. And then when you raise it as an Aboriginal person, that you're challenging, you know, you're difficult. And so some of those things that I find really difficult to understand is that, and no matter whether we get there, if we don't get there, there's the heartache. If we get there, there's going to be the heartache too, because there is, people say, well, you know, you've got to get over it. Let's draw the line and move on. From what? From what? You know, my son is just turned 30 years of age. You know, when we go places, he still gets harassed by police and followed around, you know. Where do we draw the line? It doesn't come just because of this. It comes because if we're talking truly about reconciliation during this week, there is so much more that needs to get done in all aspects of our lives. The fact that people shield away and deny that there's racism in this country is such an indictment. I can't fathom it, you know, when we look at the over-representation of Aboriginal young people, Aboriginal adults in our custody system, you know, I mean, the unemployment, all of those. You talk about closing the gap. Where do you think the gap starts? Does it start with us? Or is it the systems that are created to prevent us from arriving there? So I think that, for me, we can get there with this, but there's so much more we also have to do, not because of this, but because of each and every one of us, of these systems that have been created over 200 years ago that continue to exist at the expense of my people. So like I said, don't just walk for us, walk with us, but also rest assured we can walk. Allow us to do that because we are here and will always be here.
All right, thank you so much, Yvonne. And Geoff, over to you for our...
I just want to put on that part of the Community Commission. Does anyone know how they got to the 35 billion? Well, the first thing they did, they took the total budgets of each of the state governments and the Commonwealth budget, 550 million. And they took 3% of everything. That's where it starts. So even the Prime Minister's wage is 3% is for Aboriginal people. I don't think he used it for that. But that's how you start. You started and that got to 20 billion. And then you had the specific programs and then you had a loading on top because, geez, we live in the bush and remote areas and that's got a loading on it because it's more difficult to do programs. So that was 20% loaded on top, and that's how they got to that money. It's not actually 35 billion at all, but it's so they're the sorts of things. Just where we go to now, I think again, there's one thing I'd like to say before we finish is we acknowledge that New South Wales is like a streets ahead of other states in many issues. The Land Rights Act is the envy of other states or other countries around the world. It's not right yet. It's evolving. It's getting there. It's got its problems. We get blues all the time about it. Yeah. But we have something to have a fight about. No one else has. That's been one thing the government has done here, and I'll acknowledge the representatives here from the Friends of Reconciliation, the councils, that their work has been, their support has been unrelenting. I mean, Reverend Noel's not here, is he? I mean, I'd like to acknowledge him. Over time, his support for Aboriginal people has been unrelenting and just certain. Protected the Land Rights Act, he's protected the people. Didn't have to do that, but he does still today. And it's just that I think we have a real opportunity now. A door is opened, a sliding doors election. And there's real impetus, and it's time for us to step up. But we need everyone to come with us. Aboriginal people voting in the referendum won't get a referendum. 3% won't move anything. Double majority, half in all the 6 states, and we need 51% of the people. That's not an easy task. Day and age where a blind three-legged dog could mount a no campaign from your bedroom, where the internet goes. So all that's got to be coped with and gone through how we go about that. And there will be people who say no, there will be people there, but I hope in the end that fair-minded and decent Australians, who I think are in the great majority, ones who will support us. The current figures, they're running at 75 to 78% support. Opportunity presents itself. The only one we have this generation.
Exactly. Great point that you've made there, Geoff. And unfortunately, we have run out of time. I wish we could sit here and continue to have a yarn, because I think there's so much that I would love to draw out from this conversation. I mean, the message from here is really about consultation going forward, walking with us, and there's that opportunity when we have an opportunity, and I think I always say allyship. So we have an opportunity to work with our non-Aboriginal colleagues and friends and communities in affecting some real change. Thank you everyone for joining us today. It has been a wonderful conversation. Everyone that's joining us online, thank you. I hope you have gotten a lot out of today. If anyone has any questions, comments, feedback, please feel free to email alo@parliament.nsw.gov.au. Until next time, thank you.